So I'd like to invite Laurence Lewis, wherever you are, where are you, Laurence, to come up here. I'll tell you a little bit about Laurence, who is a volunteer with JAT, and he tells me he's been a volunteer for in excess of 30 years, so you must have started as a very young boy, Laurence. Most of your time there has been delivering age-appropriate relationship and sex education sessions in schools for 6 to 13-year-olds. In the early days of HIV and AIDS, Laurence budded a man living with HIV who unfortunately passed away. He's delivered programs about HIV and AIDS to people who ministered to the needs of Jewish people living with a positive diagnosis, i.e. nurses, doctors and care workers. He's delivered sessions to JACs as part of their cultural programme to inform them so they had a better understanding of the disease. And for about 12 years, he's been a trustee of JAT and spoken in that capacity at World AIDS Day events in synagogues. So Laurence, please come up and tell us about your work. Thank you, and thank you for coming.
Rabbi Igor, Rabbi Mark, Peggy, friends. Should I say family, perhaps? A big thank you, Peggy, for asking me to address you this evening. She did say that apart from me, she wanted a big name. As it happens, I've often been told in the past that Laurence John Lewis was quite a mouthful. Thank you, Michael. Peru Revu, be fruitful and multiply. Bereshit chapter 1, verse 28. It is quite remarkable that of the 613 commandments contained in Torah, reproduction is the very first. After the public reading of Torah, we finish with a blessing which contains the words, V'chayei olam nata b'tachenu, and planted within us eternal life. The blessing of Torah is eternal life. Even more remarkable is that the word Torah is derived from hora, which is the shoresh, the root of the Hebrew word to conceive. Our holy Torah, that seed of eternity, makes our bodies holy so they become fit partners for the soul's journey into infinity. Our very first obligation as Jews, therefore, is built upon our sexuality. In Talmud Ketubot 61b, it is written, the times for conjugal duty prescribed in the Torah are, and I apologize in advance for the political incorrectness of the following sentences. For men of independent means every day. For labourers, twice a week. For donkey drivers, once a week. For camel drivers, once in 30 days. For sailors, once in 6 months. If nothing else, could this explain why there are so few Jews in the Navy? Hello, sailor. With reproduction and its sanctity being so core to Jewish life, it should come as no surprise that in 1988, the Jewish community was the first ethnic minority group in the UK to establish an agency to deal with the emerging epidemic of HIV and AIDS, to help those either infected or affected by the virus, to develop education programs to help prevent the spread of the virus, to help eradicate the associated stigma and prejudice. In last week's Torah portion, Toledot, we read how Jacob had to disguise himself in order to receive the birthright which he thought was rightfully his. Without dwelling on the morality of this, how many LGBTQ plus people have felt obliged to disguise their true identity to avoid prejudice or harm? I certainly know that I did. Again, I'm proud to say that it also comes as no surprise that our JGLG Plus was the first faith group, not in the UK, but in the entire world, to be created as a safe haven for people who felt that elsewhere they had to disguise who they really were. In this week's Torah portion, Vayetze, Jacob flees from his father's house and feels alone and isolated in the wilderness. He falls asleep and has a dream. He sees a ladder rising to heaven with angels ascending and descending from heaven. How come the angels are described as ascending first? Surely they would have been descending from heaven. The commentators say that although Jacob felt alone and isolated, he was in fact unknowingly accompanied by angels of the Lord to protect and encourage him as he fled from his brother. How alone and isolated must our fellow Jews and those in the wider community have felt when presented with a positive diagnosis of HIV. Without sounding immodest, those in our community, thanks to the creation of JIT, were not alone and are not alone today either. In the early days, our team of dedicated volunteers were like angels to our clients. The charity was small and very hands-on, able to respond almost immediately to requests for help. Meals were delivered from one side of London to the other. Pyjamas bought and delivered to hospital beds for those without. Bed linen change for those too weak to do so themselves. Small acts perhaps, but essential to those weakened by a severely compromised immune system and with nowhere else to turn. Along with practical help and financial support, it soon became clear there was a need for preventative education to be delivered within the community. Without an education programme to provide our children and young people with the information needed to maintain their personal safety, the numbers of people in the Jewish community affected by HIV and AIDS would continue to rise. JET took professional advice, employed an education worker, devised a relationship and sex education curriculum programme that was sensitive to the faith expectations of the community, recruited and trained volunteers, whom I'm one, to deliver the programme and offered free workshops to all Jewish schools and establishments. Only a couple took up the offer. JFS, in its then location in Camden Town, was the first. And it was here that we encountered our first challenge. A large part of the HIV prevention message was safer sex. This promoted condom usage, which is not permitted under Jewish law. As our programmes come under the heading of informal education, they were under the jurisdiction of the school's Jewish Studies Department, who would not allow the use or promotion of condoms. Stalemate. The deal was struck. Prior to the school allowing us in, it was agreed that we could not mention the word condom, but could respond if it was mentioned by any of the students. I was facilitating that very first programme. Did I say that all sessions were single sex and given by a facilitator of the matching gender? They were. Before I could introduce myself or the programme, I was greeted by the condom chorus. In other words, upper six boys, 17 years or older, chanting the prohibited word over and over again. The ice was broken. From that day on, it was agreed that the word could be included in the programme. After this, the number of schools taking the workshops increased. Apart from in schools, programmes are delivered to adult groups, summer camps, care workers and residents in Jewish care homes, even in prisons as part of their education activities, recreation programmes. Now there's a bit of a boring bit. It's an update on where we are now. For a number of reasons, JIT always struggled to attract funds from the community, and when government ring-fence funding stopped, our position could no longer be maintained. In 2012, the education programme was transferred to Maccabi Streetwise, with whom we had worked for many years. Two trustees, of which I'm one, continue to work closely with the Streetwise staff, developing and renewing the relationship and sex education workshop programmes, along with several other of the original volunteers, deliver these programmes in Jewish primary and secondary schools from years 5 to 13, always age appropriate. Despite medical advances in the treatment of HIV, JIT still has over 20 clients who require financial support. I believe that in the current economic climate, the number of clients might well increase, along with increased requests for help from existing clients. Last year, we became the beneficiary of a generous monetary legacy, which allowed us to rethink our position and what we can offer the community. There is still a need for client support, and our commitment to that remains steadfast. After much discussion, it was decided to use some of the money to improve current provision for relationship in primary and relationship and sex education in secondary schools. These topics are now statutory curriculum requirement in all schools, but are ignored, sadly, in many Jewish ones. It is our wish to ensure that the legacy has lasting benefit for our young people. It is our aim to establish a cohort of well-trained, confident educators and youth workers who can pass on their training to colleagues, create age-appropriate and relevant relationship and sex education programs, and to ensure that at minimum, government requirements are fulfilled. To that end, we put out a tender to the community and have recently awarded the project to a coalition of 4 charities who already work with young people. Headed by Reshet, the partners are Keshet, Maccabi Streetwise, and Jewish Women's Aid, and the research of the project is scheduled to commence in January 2023. As a member of the JGLG since I was 30, and with JAT virtually since its inception, I'm proud to be a gay Jew and involved with both organisations. Being part of a community, we're able to achieve so much more than as just individuals. May we never feel isolated and always be part of this amazing community which collectively achieves and does so much. The message of this year's World AIDS Day is to the world with love. Again, in this week's Torah portion, we read how Jacob had to work hard for his uncle Laban for 7 years to marry his daughter Rachel, who he loved. These years seemed to Jacob but a few days. Unfortunately, at the 11th hour, he was tricked and forced to marry Leah, as she was the elder daughter. He worked for his uncle a further 7 years before Rachel became his. He served this second period as conscientiously as he did the first, but with a sense of grievance against his uncle. Ludwig Börne, German political essayist, 1786 to 1837, wrote, "Everyone has in their life a beautiful day when they find love without care and trouble. But when this day is past, you earn love as you earn bread, by the sweat of the brow." May we as Jews do all that we can to bring love and understanding to our own community and to the wider community in which we live and are a part, doing so conscientiously and happily, secure in the knowledge that although it might not always be easy, it will always be worthwhile. And with love, may we always remember those who pass too soon and their families and friends who mourn them. I'm honoured to have been asked to address you all this evening, and once again a big thank you to Peggy and the JGLG for allowing me this privilege. Thank you for listening, and Shabbat Shalom to each and every one of you.
Shalom.